In the harsh winter of 1876, beneath the merciless Dakota sky, a young bride stands abandoned. Branded with shame by her own family, she faces certain death in the frozen prairie. But fate has other plans. Through the swirling snow rides a proud Lakota warrior, bound by ancient laws and honor. He finds her trembling form and makes a choice that will forever alter both their destinies. Taking her into his protection, he guides her into the sacred valleys of his people, where survival means learning a new way of life. As she discovers her inner strength and he wrestles with tribal expectations, their growing bond threatens to upend two worlds on the brink of war. But can love truly bridge the chasm between their cultures? Could a woman cast out by her own people find salvation in the arms of those she was taught to fear? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The leather-bound Bible slipped from Sarah Mitchell's trembling fingers, landing with a soft thud in the fresh snow. She didn't bend to retrieve it, couldn't, with her wrists bound tight behind her. The holy book lay there, its gold-leafed pages, darkening with moisture, much like her own fate growing dimmer by the moment. The morning sun cast long shadows across the prairie, turning the pristine white landscape into a canvas of purple and blue shadows that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. "The Lord's judgment falls on the wicked," her father's voice rang out, bitter as the wind that cut through her thin dress. He wouldn't look at her, this man who had once carried her on his shoulders through summer wheat fields. Now he sat rigid, atop his horse, eyes fixed on some distant point beyond her shoulder, as if she had already ceased to exist. Sarah's mother wept silently in the wagon behind him, but made no move to intervene. The shame of a daughter accused of witchcraft and consorting with spirits would stain their family's name far worse than the mercy of a quick death in the winter prairie. At least, that's what the town council had decided after 3 days of closed-door meetings that sealed her fate. "I didn't," Sarah began, but her father raised his hand, silencing her as he had so many times before. "The evidence speaks for itself," he said, his voice hollow. "The marks on Miller's cattle, the strange lights in the woods, the death of your husband-to-be the night before your wedding." His fingers tightened on the reins. "God have mercy on your soul." The irony wasn't lost on her. Thomas Miller had died of a fever, nothing more. The same fever that had taken half a dozen others that autumn. But grief and fear had transformed natural death into something sinister, and she, the outsider bride brought in from the Eastern Territories, had become its scapegoat. The wagon creaked as her mother shifted, perhaps reaching for her husband's arm, perhaps simply adjusting her shawl against the bitter cold. Sarah would never know. The sharp crack of the whip made the horses start, and the wagon lurched forward, taking with it the last traces of her old life. "May God forgive us all," her father murmured, so softly she almost missed it beneath the wind's howl. Then he too turned away, leaving her alone with the vast emptiness of the Dakota Territory. Sarah watched until the wagon disappeared into the swirling snow, taking with it any hope of redemption or rescue. Her fingers had long since gone numb, both from the rope that bound them and the merciless cold. The sun, though bright, offered no warmth. Winter had come early this year, as if nature itself conspired in her punishment. She looked down at the Bible, now half buried in fresh powder. Within its pages lay pressed flowers from her mother's garden, letters from her sister back east, and all the small treasures that had marked her 20 years of life. Now they would freeze alongside her, preserved in ice, until the spring thaw revealed them to whatever wolves or travelers happened upon her remains. The wind picked up, driving needles of ice against her face. In the distance, storm clouds gathered, dark and heavy with nature's fury. She had perhaps hours before the blizzard hit, less than that before the cold took her. Already her legs trembled with the effort of standing, and her thoughts began to swim in the peculiar way she'd heard preceded freezing to death. A lone wolf's howl echoed across the prairie, closer than comfort would allow. Sarah closed her eyes, dried tears crackling on her cheeks like frozen stars. "Lord," she whispered, though she no longer knew if she believed, "if you're listening, send me a sign, any sign." The wind's only answer was to whip her skirts around her legs and toss her unbound hair into her eyes. When she opened them again, the storm clouds had drawn closer, and with them came the first scattered flakes of what promised to be a killing snow. Sarah took one step, then another, though she had no destination in mind. East led back to civilization and certain death. West led to Indian territory and an equally certain fate. North and south offered only endless prairie and the promise of a cold grave beneath the stars. The wolf howled again, and this time, somewhere in the distance, another answered. The shawl had been her grandmother's once, a fine weave of Scottish wool that had crossed an ocean and a continent to end up here, collecting snow in the Dakota wilderness. Sarah tucked her chin against its familiar softness, though the thin fabric offered little protection against the strengthening wind. Her hands, still bound behind her, had long since passed from burning pain to a dull, distant numbness that frightened her more than the cold itself. The storm descended like a predator, swift and merciless. What had begun as scattered flakes quickly became a curtain of white, obscuring everything beyond arm's reach. The wind drove ice crystals against her face, each one a tiny blade that cut into exposed skin. Her tears froze before they could fall, tiny diamonds of grief that mixed with the snow on her cheeks. Time lost meaning in the white void. She walked because stopping meant death, though each step required more effort than the last. The rope around her wrists had soaked through with snow, then frozen solid, becoming a band of ice that chafed with every movement. She had tried rubbing it against a tree trunk earlier, but the rough bark had only torn her skin, leaving tracks of blood that quickly froze black in the cold. A sudden gust nearly knocked her off her feet, and Sarah staggered sideways, losing her orientation. Which direction had she been walking? The swirling snow made it impossible to tell, and the sun had vanished behind the storm clouds, taking with it any hope of navigation. She could be walking in circles, for all she knew, tracing her own footsteps until exhaustion finally claimed her. The wolf's howl came again, closer now, and Sarah's heart lurched in her chest. She had grown up hearing stories of winter-starved wolves, how they would follow struggling travelers for days, waiting for weakness to show. Her father had once told her that wolves could smell fear. If true, she must reek of it now. Something dark loomed ahead in the whiteness, a standing rock or perhaps a dead tree. Sarah made for it, desperate for any shelter from the wind. As she drew closer, the shape resolved itself into a cluster of boulders, wind-carved into fantastic shapes over countless winters. A narrow space between two of the largest stones offered a pocket of relative calm. Sarah wedged herself into the gap, grateful for even this small respite. The rocks still held a memory of the sun's warmth, though it was fading fast. She worked her shoulders against the stone, trying to find some way to ease the strain on her bound arms. The effort cost her precious energy, but the possibility of freeing her hands seemed worth it. A sound caught her attention, something different from the constant howl of the wind. She held her breath, listening. There it came again, the soft crunch of snow under hooves. Hope and terror warred in her chest. Travelers meant possible rescue, but they could just as easily be members of her own community, coming back to ensure. She met the fate they had decided for her. The sound grew closer, accompanied now by the jingle of harness bells or something similar. Sarah pressed herself deeper into the rock's shelter, straining to see through the curtain of snow. A shadow appeared, larger than any horse she had ever seen. As it drew nearer, she realized why. It was not one horse, but two, moving in perfect tandem. The riders appeared as dark silhouettes against the white storm. Their shapes were wrong for settlers, too fluid, too much a part of their mounts. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as recognition dawned. Indians, not the friendly tribes that sometimes traded at the settlement's edges, but wild ones. Free riders from the deep prairie, their long hair whipped in the wind, adorned with feathers. that danced like living things in the storm. She tried to make herself smaller, to disappear into the rock itself, but it was too late. One of the riders had already turned his mount toward her shelter. She caught a glimpse of paint on his face, stark white and red designs that seemed to float in the air, disconnected from any human form. His eyes met hers across the snow-filled space, dark and unreadable as the storm itself. Sarah's world narrowed to that single moment, stretched thin as ice over a winter river. Everything she had been taught about the savage natives, every whispered story and dire warning, crashed against the simple reality of her situation. She was already sentenced to death by her own people. Could these strangers truly offer a worse fate? The warrior raised his hand, and Sarah couldn't tell if it was a greeting or a signal to his companion. The wind chose that moment to gust with renewed fury, driving a wall of white between them. When it cleared, the riders had vanished like smoke, leaving only tracks that were rapidly filling with fresh snow. Sarah sagged against the rock, her legs finally giving way. The brief encounter had left her shaking, though whether from fear or something else, she couldn't say. The wolves called again, their voices forming an eerie chorus with the wind. But now other sounds reached her ears. The distant thunder of hooves, the cry of an eagle far overhead, and somewhere, carried on the edge of the storm, the echo of drums. Standing Bear traced the eagle feather in his hair with calloused fingers, a gesture learned from his father and his father before him, a warrior's prayer before a difficult choice. The storm spirits danced around him, there, white robes swirling across the prairie like the ghost dances of ancient tales. His companion, young Hawk, had already turned back toward their camp, believing they had seen enough. But something held Standing Bear in place, his eyes fixed on the tracks that told a story no honorable warrior could ignore. A woman, bound and abandoned. The signs were clear in the snow despite the storm's attempt to erase them. A wagon's wheels, horse hooves, then a single set of footprints walking nowhere, circling like a wounded deer. His people had stories about the white man's cruelty, but this was something else, something that went against the laws of both peoples. "The council will not approve," young Hawk called over the wind, his voice heavy with warning. "It is not our way to meddle in the affairs of the Wasiku." Standing Bear's horse stamped restlessly beneath him, sensing its rider's tension. Isamoun. Eagle feather quivered in the wind, and with it came a memory of his grandmother's voice. Sometimes the spirits place obstacles in our path not to stop us, but to test if we are worthy of the journey. He could see the woman now, huddled between the rocks like a wounded bird. Her dress, inappropriate for the brutal weather, had nearly frozen solid. Her bound hands had turned the color of storm clouds. Without help, she would not survive another hour. The laws of his people were clear about interfering with the white settlers, but there were older laws, deeper ones, taught by the buffalo and the winter wind. Laws about honor, about protecting the helpless, about the sacred duty of the strong to shelter the weak. Standing Bear dismounted, his moccasins making no sound in the fresh snow. Behind him, young Hawk muttered a prayer to their ancestors, but made no move to stop him. They both knew what finding her meant. Once seen, her fate was tied to their honor. To leave her would be to carry the weight of her death through all their winters to come. She saw him approach, her eyes wide with a fear that cut deeper than he expected. The whites feared his people, he knew this, but seeing that terror up close stirred something profound in his warrior's heart. Here was no enemy, no threat to his tribe, just a young woman, betrayed by her own blood, facing death with whatever courage she could muster. Standing Bear stopped a few paces away, deliberately keeping his movements slow and calm, as one might approach a frightened horse. He touched his chest, then extended his hand, palm up, a gesture of peace as old as the hills themselves. "You are safe now," he said in his own tongue, knowing she wouldn't understand the words, but hoping she would hear the truth in his voice. Then, drawing on the little English he had learned from traders, "No harm." The woman's lips moved, but no sound came out. She was far gone with the cold, her skin taking on the translucent quality that preceded freezing death. Standing Bear shrugged off his buffalo robe, and in two long strides closed the distance between them, wrapping the heavy fur around her shoulders. The touch of the warm hide seemed to break something inside her. She sagged against him, either from relief or simply because her strength had finally failed. Standing Bear caught her before she could fall, turning her gently to examine the ropes that bound her wrists. Ice had formed around the bindings, fusing cloth and skin together. His knife would be needed, and a healer's touch afterward. Young Hawk appeared beside him, leading both horses. "If we do this thing," he said quietly, "there is no turning back. The council will demand answers." Standing Bear lifted the woman into his arms, feeling how light she was, how fragile. Like lifting a snow owl, all hollow bones and frozen feathers. The eagle feather brushed his cheek in the wind, reminding him of his grandmother's final teaching. The greatest warriors are not those who take the most lives, but those who save them. "Then I will give them answers," Standing Bear replied, settling the woman carefully onto his horse. "I will tell them I found a dying bird in the snow, and the spirits themselves would curse us if we left her to the wolves." The woman's eyes fluttered open as he mounted behind her, one arm holding her secure against his chest. In those eyes, he saw not just fear now, but a spark of something else, something that reminded him of the prairie stars, bright and enduring. Against the vast dark of winter nights, young Hawk snorted, but there was resigned acceptance in the sound. "Your father named you well, friend. You stand like a bear before the storm, unmovable once your mind is set." He wheeled his horse toward home. "May the ancestors guide us, for we will need their wisdom before this tale ends." The medicine pouch hung between them, swaying gently. With the horse's motion, Sarah's eyes fixed on its intricate beadwork, finding strange comfort in the geometric patterns that seemed to dance in the fading light. Her rescuer. She still couldn't think of him as a savage, not after what her own people had done, held her steady with one strong arm while guiding his horse with practiced ease through the deepening snow. The storm had eased somewhat, though darkness now crept in from the east, bringing with it a bone-deep cold that made her earlier suffering seem mild by comparison. The buffalo robe wrapped around her shoulders carried the scent of wood smoke and prairie sage, so different from the harsh lye soap of her former life. Her wrists, finally freed from their bonds, throbbed with returning circulation. The warrior had used his knife with surprising gentleness, carefully separating frozen rope from flesh before applying some strong-smelling salve from the medicine pouch. Now her hands rested awkwardly in her lap, stripped raw in places but warming. Slowly. "Medicine good, heal quick." His deep voice rumbled against her back, the English words carefully chosen. "More soon, when reach camp." Sarah managed a small nod, not trusting her voice. The last hour had passed in a blur of sensation and confusion. The terror of being discovered had given way to a desperate gratitude, then to a strange calm that might have been the beginning of acceptance or simply exhaustion. Young Hawk rode ahead of them, his outline ghostly in the gathering dusk. Every so often he would stop, waiting for them to catch up before moving on. Sarah noticed he always kept his right hand near his weapon, eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Looking for wolves, she thought at first, until she realized he was watching for her people, in case they returned to finish what they'd started. "Thank you," she finally whispered, the words catching in her throat. "My name is Sarah." There was a moment of silence, broken only by the hollow sound of hooves in snow. Then, Standing Bear. He touched his chest, then gestured to his companion. "Young Hawk." Another pause. "Sarah." Good name. The simple exchange seemed to shift something in the air between them. Sarah felt some of the rigid tension leave her shoulders, though she couldn't have said why. Perhaps it was the simple humanity of names, of acknowledgement. The stories she'd grown up hearing painted the natives as mindless savages, but there was nothing mindless in the careful way Standing Bear had treated her wounds, nothing savage. In the gentle support he now offered, a sudden gust of wind caught her grandmother's shawl, still draped around her shoulders beneath the buffalo robe. Standing Bear reached out with his free hand and caught the fabric before it could fly away, tucking it more securely around her. His fingers brushed her neck for an instant, and Sarah was surprised to find she didn't flinch. "You're impeople." Standing Bear's words came slowly, thoughtfully. "They do this?" He made a gesture toward her wrists, then to the empty prairie behind them. Sarah nodded, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "They said I was cursed, evil." The words tasted like ashes in her mouth. "They left me to die." Standing Bear was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. When he spoke again, there was a deep sadness in his voice. "Many evil things in world, helping others not one of them." He touched the medicine pouch. "My grandmother teach, every life sacred, even enemies, even strangers." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes, hot against her cold cheeks. The simple wisdom in his words struck deeper than any sermon she'd ever heard in her father's church. Before she could respond, young Hawk called out something in their native tongue. Standing Bear straightened, his arm tightening slightly around her. "Camp near," he said. "My people, some will not understand, but you safe. I give my word." The medicine pouch swayed between them, its beads catching the last light of day. Sarah reached out with trembling fingers and touched it lightly, feeling the smooth coolness of the beadwork. Standing, Bear made a soft sound of approval. "Good. Medicine," he said, "for healing body." He touched her shoulder gently. "For healing heart also, maybe." The carved wooden horse appeared in Standing Bear's hands as they rested near a sheltered grove of cottonwoods. Its surface was smooth from years of handling, the details worn but still visible. Flowing mane, alert ears, and eyes that seemed to hold wisdom. He offered it to Sarah as she huddled near the small fire young Hawk had built, her hands wrapped around a steaming bark cup of pine needle tea. "First horse I make," Standing Bear explained, settling beside her but maintaining a respectful distance. "Many winters ago, my father teach me, to know thing must make thing." He gestured to the horse. "Many days watching, learning how horse moves, thinks, feels. Then many more days with knife and wood." Sarah accepted the carving, running her fingers over its familiar yet foreign form. The horse was captured mid-stride, its body suggesting movement even in stillness. Unlike the stiff, decorative carvings she'd seen in shop windows back east, this one seemed alive with possibility. "Watch," Standing Bear said, pointing to where young Hawk tended their horses. "See how they stand in storm?" The animals had positioned themselves in a circle, heads facing inward, their bodies creating a windbreak against the weather. Horse wisdom. Together they make shelter. Alone they die. The lesson wasn't lost on Sarah. She watched as young Hawk moved among the animals, checking their hooves for ice buildup, speaking to them in low tones. His earlier wariness seemed to fade when working with the horses, replaced by a gentle patience she wouldn't have thought possible from a warrior. "Your people." Sarah hesitated, searching for words that wouldn't give offense. "They understand animals differently than we do." Standing Bear nodded, adding a small branch to their fire. "All things connected. Horse not just for riding, wolf not just for fearing. Each creature carries teaching, if we learn to see." Her touched the wooden carving in her hands. "This horse teach me patience, respect. Maybe now teach you same thing." The wind howled beyond their shelter, but within the grove the cottonwoods broke its force into manageable whispers. Sarah found herself relaxing despite the cold, the tea's warmth spreading through her chest like a blessing. Young Hawk returned to the fire, settling on its opposite side with fluid grace. He spoke to Standing Bear in their language, his tone serious but not urgent. Standing Bear listened, then translated for Sarah's benefit. "Storm growing stronger. Must reach winter camp before night fully comes. 3 hours, ride still." Sarah's heart quickened at the thought of meeting more of their people, but she forced herself to remain calm. These two had shown her nothing but kindness. Surely their tribe couldn't be so different. Still, she remembered Standing Bear's earlier warning about some not understanding. As if reading her thoughts, Standing Bear added softly, "My mother, wait at camp. She's wise woman, respected healer. She will help others understand. He touched the medicine pouch at his belt. These medicines from her teaching. They doused the fire and mounted up again, but not before Standing Bear showed Sarah how to wrap her feet in rabbit fur to ward off frostbite, a simple technique that made her marvel at its effectiveness. The wooden horse found a home in a pouch. At her waist, its solid presence oddly comforting. The landscape changed as they rode, becoming more varied. Small hollows and rises replaced the flat prairie, and stands of trees appeared more frequently. Standing Bear pointed out markers she would have missed. A distinctively shaped rock, a bent tree, a cluster of bushes that somehow spoke of direction to his trained eye. "Land speaks," he explained, guiding his horse around a snow-covered boulder. "Like good friend, always telling truth if you learn to listen." He indicated a distant line of hills, barely visible through the growing darkness. "There, winter camp waits. Safe place, good water, shelter from wind, plenty game." Young Hawk called back something that made Standing Bear chuckle. When Sarah glanced up questioningly, he translated, "He says you learn fast for a wasiku, white person. Many cannot see land at all, only things to take from it." The simple observation struck Sarah deeply. How often had she heard her father and the other settlers speak of the land only in terms of what it could provide? Fields for farming, trees for lumber, rivers for mills. Never once had they discussed listening to it, learning from it. The wooden horse pressed against her side as their mount navigated a steep slope, and Sarah found herself wondering what other wisdom these people held, what other truths she had been too blind to see in her former life. The storm continued around them, but now she began to read its voice differently, not as nature's fury, but as part of a larger conversation she was just beginning to understand. The sacred pipe appeared first as a silhouette against firelight, held high by an elder whose face bore the deep lines of many winters. Sarah watched from atop Standing Bear's horse as the camp materialized out of the storm's darkness, a collection of hide lodges arranged in a great circle, smoke rising from their tops to meet the swirling snow. The sight struck her with its simple perfection, so different from the rigid rows of settler cabins she had known. Dogs announced their arrival first, their barking carrying notes of both warning and welcome. Then came the people, emerging from their lodges like shadows taking form. Children ducked behind their mothers' skirts, pointing and whispering. Warriors stood straight-backed, their expressions guarded but not hostile, and through them all walked the elder with the pipe, his presence parting the crowd like a stone dividing water. "My grandfather," Standing Bear murmured, his voice carrying both respect and apprehension. "Medicine man of the band. He will decide first words." The old man stopped before their horses, his dark eyes finding Sarah's with unsettling directness. He spoke in their language, his voice deep and melodious despite his age. Standing Bear replied with formal words that included Sarah's name, then added something that made the old man's eyebrows rise. "He asks if you were truly cast out by your own blood," Standing Bear translated quietly. Sarah nodded, forcing herself to meet the elder's gaze. "Yes," she said, though she knew he wouldn't understand her words. "They left me to the storm's mercy." Standing Bear translated, and something shifted in the old man's expression. He lifted the pipe, speaking words that seemed to carry weight beyond their sound. The crowd murmured, and Sarah felt the atmosphere change, though she couldn't have said how. "He says the pipe has shown him a vision," Standing Bear explained as he helped her down from the horse. Her legs trembled from cold and riding, but she forced herself to stand straight. "A white bird lost in winter, finding shelter in an eagle's nest. He says such things do not happen by chance." A woman emerged from the crowd then, her silver-streaked hair bound in 2 long braids. Unlike the others, she walked directly to Sarah, her movements sure and purposeful. Without hesitation, she took Sarah's cold hands in her warm ones, turning them to examine the rope wounds on her wrists. "My mother," Standing Bear said, pride evident in his voice. "The healing woman I spoke of." The woman clicked her tongue. At the sight of Sarah's injuries, then spoke rapidly to her son. Standing Bear nodded. "She says you need warm food, dry clothes, and medicine for these wounds." The council can wait until you are stronger. The grandfather raised the pipe once more, speaking words that silenced the murmuring crowd. Young Hawk, who had been quietly translating to another warrior, turned to Sarah with unusual gentleness. In his expression, "He gives permission for you to stay," he said in his careful English. "Says storm spirits brought you to us for purpose. Must wait to see what purpose is." Standing Bear's mother tugged gently at Sarah's arm, gesturing toward one of the larger lodges. The warmth and light, spilling from its entrance, beckoned like a promise of sanctuary. But Sarah hesitated, looking back at Standing Bear. He nodded encouragement. "Go. Mother will. Don't care for you. I must speak with council, explain things." His hand brushed the eagle feather in his hair, that gesture she was beginning to recognize as his way of gathering strength. "Rest now. Be strong for tomorrow." As Sarah followed the healing woman toward the lodge, she heard the grandfather speaking again. The words were foreign, but their cadence reminded her of her father's prayers, not the harsh judgments of recent days, but the older benedictions she remembered from childhood, full of mystery and hope. A young girl darted from behind her mother's skirts, pressing something into Sarah's hand before running away with a giggle. It was a small bag of dried berries, the kind Sarah had often traded for at the settlement's edge. The simple gesture brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Inside the lodge, warmth enveloped her like an embrace. Standing Bear's mother guided her to a pile of soft furs near the central fire, where an older woman was already preparing a steaming drink that smelled of herbs and honey. The firelight caught the beadwork on their clothing, creating patterns that danced like living things on the lodge's walls. Sarah clutched the small bag of berries, thinking of the wooden horse at her waist and the medicine pouch that had begun. Her healing, 3 gifts freely given, 3 tokens of acceptance in a world she had been taught to fear. Outside, she could hear the council gathering, their deep voices carried on the wind like the distant roll of thunder. But here, in this moment, watching the fire paint shadows on the lodge's walls, she felt something she had not expected to feel again: hope. Dawn arrived with the gift of a beaded dress, laid beside Sarah's sleeping furs while the morning star still hung in the sky. The garment spoke of both practicality and beauty, sturdy hide, decorated with intricate patterns of blue and white beads that reminded her of flowing water. Standing Bear's mother, whose name she had learned was singing, Brooke, helped her into the unfamiliar clothing with gentle patience. "For new path," the older woman said in halting English, smoothing the dress over Sarah's shoulders. "Old life like winter snow, melts away, feeds spring flowers." She touched one of the beaded patterns. "These say, woman who walks between worlds. My grandmother's dress, now yours." Sarah ran her fingers over the beadwork, feeling the stories woven into each careful stitch. The dress fit as if it had been made for her, though it had clearly been crafted decades before her birth. The weight of its history settled around her like a blessing. Outside the lodge, the camp was already alive with morning activity. Women moved purposefully between lodges, carrying water and gathering materials for the day's work. Children darted about like prairie sparrows, their laughter carrying on the crisp morning air. The storm had passed in the night, leaving behind a world transformed by fresh snow and crystalline light. Standing Bear appeared from the direction of the horse herd, his breath visible in the cold air. He paused when he saw her, something flickering in his expression that made Sarah's heart skip. "The dress," he said softly. "It suits you." Before she could respond, a group of women approached, led by a tall, graceful woman whose bearing reminded Sarah of the deer she had sometimes glimpsed at dawn. "My sister Rain Dancer," Standing Bear introduced. "She will show you women's ways." Rain Dancer's smile carried no trace of the previous night's wariness. "Come," she said, her English clearer than Sarah had expected. "Much to learn, much to share." She gestured to the other women. "We prepare pemmican today, good food for winter, good time for stories." The work circle welcomed Sarah with the same gentle acceptance she had received from Rain Dancer. They showed her how to slice the dried meat thin, how to pound it with berries and fat until it became a rich, preservable food. As they worked, they taught her words in their language, simple things at first, the names of tools and ingredients. One of the younger women, barely more than a girl, giggled when Sarah mispronounced a word. But it was friendly laughter, followed immediately by patient correction and shared smiles. Sarah found herself laughing too, the sound strange in her throat after so many days of fear and silence. "You have good hands," an elder observed, watching Sarah's careful handling of the meat. "Respectful. Some wasiku rush, waste much. You understand value." The morning passed in a blur of activity and learning. Sarah's arms ached from unaccustomed work, but it was a good ache, honest and earned. She watched how the women moved, their efficiency born of generations of practice. Every task had its rhythm, its proper way, yet there was room for conversation and laughter. Standing Bear appeared again near midday, carrying something wrapped in hide. He waited until there was a natural pause in the work before approaching. "The council has spoken," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "They say you may stay through winter, learn our ways. When spring comes," he paused, "when spring comes, you choose your path." The women around Sarah continued their work, but she could feel their attention, their quiet support. Rain Dancer moved slightly closer, her presence offering silent strength. Standing Bear unwrapped the bundle he carried, revealing a pair of beautifully beaded moccasins. "From my mother," he explained. "She says bare feet cannot dance with buffalo, cannot walk new trails." His eyes met Sarah's. "Cannot find new home, if that is what heart chooses." Sarah accepted the moccasins, understanding the deeper meaning. In the gift, not just footwear, but possibility, not just acceptance, but invitation. The beadwork caught the winter sunlight, scattering tiny rainbows across the snow. "Thank you," she said, the words feeling inadequate for the magnitude of what was being offered. Then carefully forming the sounds she had learned that morning, Pilamaya, thank you in their tongue. Standing Bear's smile was like the sunrise, warm, bright, and full of promise. Around them, the women's work continued, the rhythm of it. Now feeling less foreign, more like a song Sarah was slowly learning to sing. The bone needle glinted in the firelight as Sarah worked, her fingers moving with growing confidence through the layers of hide. 2 weeks had passed since her arrival, marked by the waxing of the winter moon and the steady accumulation of new skills. The needle, a gift from an elder named Turtle Woman, had become both tool and teacher, its smooth surface worn by generations of women's hands. "Good tension," Singing Brook noted, watching Sarah's careful stitches. "Strong seam keeps wind out, warmth in." She pointed to the geometric pattern Sarah was attempting to replicate. "Pattern tells story. Each line, each turn has meaning." Sarah nodded, studying the way the design seemed to flow like a river across the leather. She had learned that nothing in their craft was purely decorative. Every pattern held significance. Every color carried meaning. The simple sewing she had learned in her former life seemed childish in comparison to this complex art of storytelling through stitch and bead. "What story does this one tell?" she asked, fingers tracing the half-finished design. Singing Brook's eyes crinkled with approval at the question. "Speaks of journey," she explained. "See here, this line shows path through storm. These marks, like snowflakes, they mean change, transformation. And this spiral at center?" She touched it gently. "That is heart finding home." The symbolism wasn't lost on Sarah. She had noticed how the women's teachings often carried deeper meanings, lessons wrapped in the practical skills of daily life. Even the way they prepared food held wisdom. Nothing wasted, everything used, in its proper time and way. A commotion outside drew their attention. Young hunters were returning, their successful hunt marked by calls of celebration. Sarah found herself recognizing more words now, understanding fragments of conversations that would have been meaningless just days ago. "Go," Singing Brook urged with a knowing smile. "My son waits with others. Perhaps he shows you proper way to honor buffalo spirit." Sarah carefully set aside her work, wrapping the precious needle in its leather case. As she emerged from the lodge, the brilliant winter sun made her blink. The hunting party had indeed returned with a buffalo, its massive form already being prepared for butchering with practiced efficiency. Standing Bear stood among the hunters, his face flushed with exertion and success. He had been away for 3 days tracking the herd, though Sarah had found herself marking each sunset until his return. Now he spoke with the other men, describing something with animated gestures, but his eyes found her immediately. "Come," he called, meeting her halfway. "Time you learned buffalo ways." The next hours passed in a blur of activity and instruction. Sarah watched and helped, as the women worked with incredible coordination, each knowing their role in the ancient dance of providing for the tribe. Nothing was wasted. Meat, hide, bones, organs, all had their purpose. "See how they save blood?" Young Hawk's wife, mourning, Star, whispered to her as they worked. "Mix with herbs, make strong medicine. Your people throw away many good things, yes?" Sarah thought of the wasteful hunting she had witnessed at the settlement, where men shot buffalo by the dozens, taking only choice cuts and leaving the rest. "To rot." "Yes," she admitted. "They do not understand the buffalo's gift." "You understand now," Morningstar said with satisfaction, beginning to see with Lakota eyes. As the sun began its descent, the work continued by firelight. Sarah's arms ached, but she felt a deep satisfaction in the labor. She had learned to slice the meat just so, to prepare the hide for tanning, to recognize which parts were destined for medicine and which for food. Standing Bear found her again as the stars emerged, offering a steaming bowl of fresh broth. "First taste always goes to hunters," he explained, "but I save special piece for you. Build strength for winter's learning." Their fingers brushed as she accepted the bowl, and Sarah felt warmth that had nothing to do with the hot liquid. She sipped carefully, savoring the rich flavor that was becoming familiar. "Thank you for teaching me," she said softly. "All of you. I never knew there was so much to understand." He settled beside her, their shoulders nearly touching. "You learn fast, see things others miss." His voice carried a note of pride. "Tomorrow, if you wish, I show you how to read buffalo tracks in snow. Many stories written there for those who know how to look." Sarah touched the bone needle in its case at her belt, thinking of Singing Brook's words about patterns and meaning. She was beginning to see them everywhere now, in beadwork and tracks, in the way smoke rose from lodge fires, in the dance of snowflakes against the darkening sky. Each day brought new understanding, new threads in a pattern she was only beginning to comprehend. "I would like that," she said, and was surprised to realize how true it was. The past was receding like the storm that had brought her here, and in its place, a different future was taking shape, stitch by careful stitch. The scout's message arrived with the bitter wind of late winter, carried by a young rider who's exhausted. Horse spoke of hard travel. Sarah was grinding herbs with Singing Brook when the drum's urgent rhythm cut through the routine sounds of camp life. One beat, then 3, then 1 again, the signal for council gathering. Standing Bear appeared at the lodge entrance, his face grave. "Scouts bring news from eastern lands," he said, his voice low enough that only Sarah and his mother could hear. "Blue coats move in winter. This is not their way." Sarah's hands stilled on the grinding stone. Blue coats, the cavalry, her people's army, though she could no longer think of them as hers. She had learned enough in the past month to understand what their movement meant. Broken treaties, threatened lands, the steady push of civilization into sacred spaces. "How many?" Singing Brook asked, already reaching for her medicine bundles. "Many, more than last summer." Standing Bear's hand moved to the eagle feather in his hair. "They build new fort in Black Hills, sacred land." His eyes met Sarah's, carrying a weight of unspoken concern. "Council must decide. You should come." Sarah wiped her hands clean, heart quickening. She had never been invited to a council meeting before. "Are you sure? The elders need to hear truth from one who knows Wasiku ways," he finished. "You have earned place here, right to speak." Outside, the camp had taken on the tense alertness of a herd sensing wolves. Warriors gathered near the council lodge, their usual easy manner replaced by focused intensity. Young Hawk stood among them, deep in conversation with the exhausted scout. He looked up as Sarah approached with Standing Bear, giving her a grave nod. The council lodge was already thick with pipe smoke when they entered, the air heavy with unspoken concerns. Grandfather sat in his place of honor, the sacred pipe resting across his knees. His face was unreadable as Standing Bear led Sarah to a place in the circle, but he acknowledged them both with a slight nod. The scout's words, translated in whispers by Standing Bear, painted a grim picture. The new fort was larger than any before, built to house hundreds of soldiers. Supply wagons arrived daily, carrying not just provisions, but heavy weapons. More settlers followed in their wake, cutting trees, staking claims. "They hunt our buffalo to feed their soldiers," young Hawk added, his voice bitter. "Leave carcasses to rot, taking only tongues and hides, sacred creatures dying for nothing." An elder spoke up, his words carrying the weight of many winters. "We have seen this before. First the fort, then the towns. Soon the iron horse will follow, splitting our lands like lightning splits a tree." Sarah felt the eyes of the council turn to her. Taking a deep breath, she rose to her feet. Months ago, she would have trembled at such attention. Now she stood straight, grounded in the strength of her new family. "The bluecoats will not stop," she said, her words carefully translated by Standing Bear. "I have heard their leaders speak. They believe it is their destiny to own all lands, sea to sea. They do not see as you see, that land owns itself, that buffalo are relations, that waters run free by sacred right." The grandfather leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "And you, woman between worlds, what do you see?" Sarah touched the bone needle at her belt, drawing courage from its familiar presence. "I see two paths. One leads to war, where many will die on both sides, and in the end, the guns and numbers of the Wasiku will prevail. The other," she paused, feeling the weight of her next words, "the other requires something harder than fighting." A murmur ran through the lodge. Standing Bear's hand brushed hers briefly, offering silent support. "Speak," the grandfather commanded. "Learn their ways while keeping your own," Sarah said. "Not to submit, but to survive. To protect what matters most, your children, your stories, your ceremonies. The Wasiku fear what they do not understand. Perhaps understanding can become a shield stronger than war." Silence fell, broken only by the crack of burning wood in the central fire. Then young Hawk spoke, his voice thoughtful. "She speaks with a warrior's heart, though she counsels against war." "The buffalo teaches us," added Rain Dancer from her place in the circle. "When storm comes, they face into wind, stand strong. Together, this is how they survive winter." The grandfather lifted the sacred pipe, his motion drawing all eyes. "The spirits brought us this one," he said, gesturing to Sarah with the pipe stem. "Perhaps they knew such storms were coming. Perhaps they sent us one who could help us see through Wasiku eyes, while teaching them to see through ours." But before he could speak further, a cry came from outside. The alarm signal, 3 sharp whistles cutting through the winter air. Standing Bear was on his feet instantly, Sarah rising beside him. "Riders coming!" young Hawk called from the lodge entrance. Many riders from the east. The Dreamcatcher swayed in the cold breeze, entering through the lodge's smoke hole, its intricate web catching the last rays of sunset. Sarah had woven it herself, guided by Singing Brook's patient hands during the tense hours of waiting. Now, it hung as a testament to something she could no longer deny. Her heart had found its home here, in this place she once feared, with this man she had been taught to distrust. Standing Bear entered the lodge like a shadow, his movements silent, despite his warrior's build. The riders they had feared turned out to be a friendly band, seeking shelter from heavy snow, but the false alarm had awakened something in both of them. An awareness of precious time slipping away like water through cupped hands. "You should be resting," he said softly, settling beside her near the fire. "Long day's counsel, much worry. I'm learning to weave dreams, Sarah replied, gesturing to her creation. Your mother says it helps calm troubled thoughts. He studied the dream catcher, noting the personal touches she had added to the traditional design. A small carved horse, like the one he had given her, worked into the web's center, and beads the color of winter sky marking the cardinal directions. You weave more than dreams, he observed, his voice carrying a depth of meaning that made her heart quicken. You weave two worlds together, like spider making bridge between branches. Sarah turned to face him, finding courage in the firelights. Warm glow. When I first came here, I thought I was learning to be Lakota, but now I understand. I'm learning to be more fully myself. She touched one of the dream catcher's feathers. These past months, you and your people have taught me to see with new eyes, to feel with a larger heart. Standing Bear's hand found hers in the growing darkness, and you have taught us also, shown us Wasiku can have good hearts, when given. Chance to understand? His fingers intertwined with hers, warm and calloused from bough and rain. Shown me that some storms bring gifts we do not expect. The fire crackled, sending sparks dancing upward like early stars. Outside, the evening sounds of the camp created a familiar symphony, women calling children to supper, horses nickering softly, the distant pulse of drums from the young men's lodge. Sarah had learned to read these sounds like a language, to understand the rhythm of a life lived in harmony with earth and sky. The council respects your words now. Standing. Bear continued, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. They see wisdom in walking between worlds, but he hesitated, something vulnerable entering his expression. I wonder if you walk alone, or if perhaps there is room on that path for two? Sarah's breath caught in her throat. They had been moving toward this moment for weeks, each day bringing them closer like tributaries joining to form a river. But to hear it spoken, to face it directly, this was different. This was real. When I was young, she said carefully, my grandmother told me that love is like an arrow. Once loosed, it flies straight and true, caring nothing for the boundaries men draw on maps. She squeezed his hand. I didn't understand then. I do now. Standing Bear reached up with his free hand, touching the dream catcher with reverent fingers. My people say dreams show us truth, if we are brave enough to see it. Many nights I dream of future, not just mine, but all our people. In dream I see two paths, like you spoke of in council. One path leads to war, to ending. Other path. What do you see on the other path? Sarah whispered, though something in her heart already knew the answer. I see children, he said softly, with eyes like summer sky and hair like river at night. I see lodges where both languages are spoken, where both ways are honored. I see you, teaching these children to walk proud in two worlds, while I teach them to hear wind's wisdom, to read buffalo's signs. The dream catcher turns slowly above them, its web catching firelight like dew. Sarah thought of her father's rigid beliefs, of the settlement's fearful prejudices. She thought of Standing Bear's people, their initial wariness transformed gradually into acceptance, and she thought of her own heart, how it had grown beyond the narrow confines of her old life into something vast and free as the prairie itself. When I weave, she said, lifting their joined hands toward the dream catcher, I weave for that future. When I pray for that path. She met his eyes directly. I choose to walk it with you, if you'll have me. Standing Bear's answer came, not in words, but in the gentle press of his lips against her forehead, a gesture of such tender reverence that it brought tears to her eyes. Above them, the dream catcher turned in a sudden draught, its shadows dancing on the lodge walls like spirits celebrating a union written in the stars long before either of them drew breath. The broken arrow lay in the fresh snow like an omen, its shaft split cleanly down the middle. Young Hawk had found it at dawn, along with tracks that spoke of settlers moving through their hunting grounds. But these were not random homesteaders. The prints showed an organized search pattern, methodical and purposeful. Your brother leads them, young Hawk told Sarah, his voice gentle despite the news he carried. We found his horse's marks, the one with the star on its foot, like you described. Sarah's hands tightened on the rim of her cooking basket. Benjamin, her eldest brother, who had once sworn to protect her always. Now he led a search party through Lakota lands, though whether to rescue or condemn her, she couldn't be certain. Standing Bear stood at the lodge entrance, his expression troubled. They camp 3 valleys away, 15 men, well armed. He moved to Sarah's side, close enough that she could feel his warmth. What would your brother do if he found you here? The question hung in the air like winter breath. Sarah thought of Benjamin's fierce pride, his unwavering belief in their father's harsh God. He would try to save me, she said finally, even if it meant destroying everything and everyone here. Singing Brook, who had been quietly preparing. Medicines spoke up. Then we must save him instead, save him from his own blind heart. Standing Bear's hand found the empty quiver where the broken arrow had once resided. Some of the young warriors speak of attack. They say better to strike first, drive settlers from our hunting grounds. His voice carried the weight of leadership. But blood calls to blood. This is your family. No, Sarah said, more sharply than she intended. You are my family now. All of you. She touched the beaded dress she wore, the bone needle at her belt, the dream catcher that now hung above their shared sleeping furs. These past months have taught me what true family means. Not just bonds of birth, but bonds of choice. Young Hawk nodded approval, but his expression remained concerned. Choice or birth, blood will flow if they find camp. Too many guns, too much fear on both sides. Rain Dancer, who had entered quietly during their discussion, added her voice. The women talk of moving camp early. Many remember stories of other bands who waited too long, lost everything to bluecoat guns. Standing Bear paced the lodge, his steps measured and thoughtful. Moving camp takes time. Winter makes travel slow, dangerous for young ones and elders. He paused, looking at Sarah with eyes that held both love and worry. But perhaps we can turn their fear to understanding, as you have turned ours. Sarah stood, understanding blooming in her heart. You mean for me to go to them? No, the word burst from Standing Bear with unexpected force. He crossed to her in 2 long strides, taking her hands in his. They left you to die once. I will not risk. You must, she interrupted gently. You know this is the way. She squeezed his hands, drawing strength from their warmth. Let me be the bridge you spoke of. Let me show them what I have learned about walking between worlds. Young Hawk's hand moved to his weapon, but Standing Bear stopped him with a look. If you go, he said to Sarah, I go with you. No more separation. The broken arrow caught the morning light, its splintered shaft casting twin shadows on the snow. Sarah thought of her grandmother's lessons about omens, mixed now with the Lakota teachings about signs and spirits. Perhaps this broken arrow spoke, not of warfare, but of the breaking of old ways, the emergence of something new from the shattered pieces of the past. Together then, she agreed, but we must go soon before the young warriors grow too restless, before my brother's fear hardens into hatred. Singing Brook rose, her medicine bundles in hand. I will prepare protection bundles. Spirits must guide this meeting. She touched Sarah's cheek with maternal tenderness. You have warrior's heart, daughter, not for fighting, but for making peace. Harder battle, that. Standing Bear spoke rapidly to young Hawk in their language, battle plans transforming into peace plans. Young Hawk nodded, already moving to select the warriors who would accompany them, not the hot bloods eager for combat, but the steady ones, those who had learned to value wisdom over glory. Sarah retrieved the dream catcher from their lodge, carefully wrapping it in soft hide. Its web had caught more than dreams. It had caught a vision of possibility. Now she had to make others see that vision, had to prove that understanding could. Bridge the chasm between worlds better than bullets ever could. We leave at midday, Standing Bear announced, returning to her side. Small party, peaceful approach. He touched the eagle feather in his hair, then gently tucked a matching one into Sarah's braid. We go not as warriors, but as teachers. Show them truth they do not expect. The morning sun climbed higher, making the broken arrow's shadows dance. Sarah thought of Benjamin, of the brother he had been before fear and prejudice hardened his heart. Perhaps, like the arrow, what was broken could be remade into something new, not restored to what it was, but transformed into what it might become. The shared blanket wrapped around their shoulders as Sarah and Standing Bear sat at the edge of camp, watching the stars emerge one by one into the crystal-clear winter sky. These quiet moments had become precious to them, more so now with danger approaching. The blanket, a wedding gift from Singing Brook, though no formal ceremony had yet been held, bore the pattern of two rivers joining to form one, picked out, in white and blue beads against dark wool. "My father used to say that stars are holes in the floor of heaven," Sarah murmured, leaning into Standing Bear's warmth. "What do your people say of them?" His arm tightened around her slightly as he pointed upward. "Each star is ancestors' fire," he explained. "They camp above, watching over us, sharing stories among themselves about the people below." His voice took on the rhythmic quality of a teaching tale. "When great warriors or wise women leave this world, they join Star Nation, adding their fire to the sky." Sarah touched the eagle feather in her hair, matching the one Standing Bear wore. "And what stories will they tell of us, do you think? Of a Lakota warrior and a Wasiku woman who found each other in the storm." "They will tell of courage," he said softly, "of hearts strong enough to break old patterns, like spring ice breaking on river." His hand found hers beneath the blanket. "They will tell of love that builds bridges instead of walls." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with the night sounds they both had learned to read like a familiar book, the distant howl of wolves, the whisper of wind through bare branches, the soft thud of snow falling from laden boughs. In the camp behind them, children's laughter mingled with women's songs and the steady pulse of evening drums. "I'm afraid," Sarah admitted finally, voicing the fear she had held close all day, "not of Benjamin, or even of what might happen tomorrow. I'm afraid of failing, of not being strong enough to make them understand what I've learned here." Standing Bear shifted to face her, his dark eyes serious in the starlight. "Tell me what you have learned," Sarah considered, watching her breath. "Make patterns in the cold air. I've learned that strength isn't always about standing firm. Sometimes it's about being willing to change, to flow like water around stones. I've learned that wisdom doesn't always speak in a language we know, but it's there in the buffalo's tracks, in the way birds fly before a storm, in the patterns women weave into blankets and beads." She touched the blanket around them, tracing. "It's symbolic rivers. Most of all, I've learned that love isn't about possession or control. It's about making space for someone to become their truest self, even if that self surprises us." Standing Bear's hand rose to cup her cheek, his thumb gently tracing the curve of her cheekbone. "You see, you have warrior's wisdom already. Speak to your brother with such truth, and he must hear, even if hearing hurts at first. And if he doesn't," she whispered, "then we face whatever comes together." He gestured to the stars above. "Like those two bright ones there, separate lights, but to earth-walking eyes, they look like one star. Two paths joining, making new way through sky." Sarah leaned into his touch, remembering how she had once flinched from it in fear and strangeness. Now his presence was as essential to her as breath, as natural as the turning of seasons. "When we return," she said, "I want to make it official. I want to marry according to your ways, to be joined before your people and the spirits they honor." Standing Bear's smile was brilliant in the darkness. "And I will learn your ways too. We will build something new, something that honors both paths." He touched her braid, where it mingled with his, black and brown strands twined together, like this, separate but stronger together. From the camp came Singing Brook's voice, calling them to the evening meal. They rose together, the blanket still wrapped around both their shoulders. As they walked back toward the firelight, Sarah felt the weight of tomorrow's challenge, but also the strength of this love they had forged against all odds. In the sky above, stars continued their ancient dance, watching over two people who dared to dream of a new way, a bridge between worlds built not of timber and iron, but of understanding and hope. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring, but tonight, beneath the Star Nation's countless fires, they were simply two hearts beating as one beneath a shared blanket, writing their own story into the endless winter sky. The war paint rested in its ceremonial bowl, a mixture of red ochre and sacred herbs that caught the dawn light like dried blood. Sarah watched as Standing Bear prepared it with careful reverence, his movements measured and deliberate. Though they came in peace, the paint would be needed, not as a threat, but as spiritual protection, a symbol of their determination to stand strong before whatever came. Paint tells story, he explained, mixing the colors with practiced hands. Red for life's blood, for courage, white for wisdom, for peace. His fingers traced designs in the air. Each line speaks to spirits, asks their guidance. Young Hawk entered the lodge, already wearing his own paint, subtle patterns that spoke of protection rather than aggression. "Scouts report your brother's party has moved closer," he said to Sarah. "They search in spiral pattern, like hawks circling prey. Will find us by midday." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. She wore her beaded dress, but had added her grandmother's shawl, a bridge between her old life and new. "How do the young warriors fare?" "They obey," young Hawk replied, though his expression suggested it wasn't easy. Standing Bear's words carry weight. They watch and wait as ordered. Standing Bear began applying his paint, each stroke precise and meaningful. "We take 12 riders," he said, 4 to guard flanks, 4 to watch rear, 4 to approach. He met Sarah's eyes in the polished copper mirror, small enough to not threaten, large enough to command respect. "Benjamin was always proud," Sarah said, remembering her brother's quick temper, his fierce sense of family honor. "He won't expect me to come to him freely. In his mind, I must be a captive, bewitched or broken. Then we show him truth he does." "Not expect," Standing Bear replied, finishing the last line of paint. "Show him sister who has grown strong, not weak, who chooses path with clear eyes and brave heart." Singing Brook entered, carrying small bundles of herbs and prayers. "For protection," she said, tucking them into Sarah's dress, then Standing Bear's shirt. "Medicine for peace, if they will accept it. Medicine for strength, if they will not." Outside, horses stomped in the cold morning air, their breath forming clouds in the pale light. The chosen warriors waited, their paint subtle like young hawks, ready for peace, but prepared for other outcomes. Sarah recognized Rain Dancer's husband among them and Morning Star's brother, men who had come to know her as family. "Remember," Standing Bear addressed them in both languages, his voice carrying quiet authority, "we go not to fight, but to understand, not to conquer, but to connect." He helped Sarah mount behind him, her arms sliding naturally around his waist. "Watch for signals. Stay calm no matter what words they speak." Young Hawk wheeled his horse alongside them. "They will have guns," he said quietly. "We have truth," Standing Bear replied. "Stronger weapon if we use it well." They rode out as the sun cleared the eastern hills, 12 riders moving like shadows through the winter landscape. Sarah felt the medicine bundles press against her. Heart smelled the familiar scent of Standing Bear's paint, mixing with the crisp morning air. Everything felt sharper somehow, more vivid, each sound, each sensation etched with crystal clarity into her memory. An eagle appeared overhead, circling. Once before flying east, Standing Bear touched his feather, then Sarah's. "Good sign," he murmured. "Eagle shows path, offers protection." They rode in silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts and prayers. Sarah rehearsed what she would say to Benjamin, knowing that first moments would be crucial. He would look for signs of abuse or coercion, for anything to justify his assumptions about her captivity. Instead, she would show him a woman transformed by choice and love, stronger for having walked between worlds. Near mid-morning, they crested a rise and saw smoke from a camp in the valley below. Young Hawk raised his hand, signaling a halt. Through the clear winter air, they could make out figures moving around fires, the shapes of horses and weapons. 15 men, young Hawk confirmed softly. Armed, as expected. They post guards, but not well, too confident in their numbers. Standing Bear squeezed Sarah's hand where it rested against his chest. Ready? She straightened, feeling the weight of both worlds on her shoulders. The beaded dress and grandmother's shawl, the eagle feather and bone needle, all the symbols of a life-bridging ancient divisions. Ready? He raised his arm, and their small party moved forward in perfect formation, emerging from the shadows of the trees like spirits made flesh. The winter sun caught their paint and beadwork, making them shine like something from another world. Below, a shout went up from the settler camp. Metal glinted as weapons were grabbed. Remember, Standing Bear said, his voice carrying to all their riders, we come in peace, but we come with pride. We are not supplicants, but equals. We seek not approval, but understanding. Sarah saw a familiar figure emerge from among the settlers, tall, broad-shouldered, with their father's bearing, Benjamin. He shaded his eyes against the sun, staring up at the approaching riders. The moment of contact approached with the inevitability of an arrow in flight. Sarah straightened, her spine feeling the strength of her chosen family around her. Whatever came next would shape not just her future, but perhaps the future of two peoples. She touched the medicine bundle at her heart and sent up a silent prayer to both the God of her childhood and the spirits of this land. The snow beneath their horses' hooves crunched like destiny. The two-spirit necklace at Sarah's throat caught the winter sun as she dismounted, its shells and beads clicking softly like prayer counters. Rain Dancer had given it to her that morning, explaining its meaning. Two spirits in one body, two worlds in one heart. Like you now, not torn between, but made stronger by both. Benjamin's face was a storm of emotions as she walked forward. Standing Bear close beside her but not touching. Recognition, relief, confusion at her clear freedom of movement, anger at her traditional dress and the proud way she wore it. His hand stayed near his pistol, but didn't draw. Sarah, his voice, cracked slightly. We thought, Father said, that I was dead. She kept her voice gentle but firm. Or that I was a captive. Look at me, Benjamin. Really look. Around them, both groups maintained their positions with tense discipline. Young Hawk's warriors sat their horses with calculated calm, while Benjamin's men fingered their weapons nervously, eyes darting between Sarah and the painted riders who surrounded them. You're dressed like them. Benjamin's words carried both accusation and bewilderment. Speaking their tongue, he glared at Standing Bear. What have you done to her? He saved my life, Sarah said, stepping forward. After our own people, our own family, left me to die in the storm. She touched the two-spirit necklace. He and his people showed me what true Christianity looks like, brother. Love for strangers, mercy for enemies, wisdom to see God's hand in unfamiliar ways. Standing Bear spoke then, his English careful but clear. Your sister walks free, chooses her path. We come not to fight, but to build bridge between peoples. Benjamin's hand tightened on his pistol. Build a bridge. They're savages, Sarah. They raid settlements, steal cattle. And what do we do to them? Sarah countered. Push them from their lands, break treaties, kill buffalo by the hundreds for sport? She gestured to the warriors around them. Look at them, Benjamin. Look with new eyes, as I had to learn to do. These are not savages. These are people who understand things we've forgotten. Forgotten? Benjamin spat. Like what? Like how to live with the land instead of fighting it, like how to see the sacred in all things, not just within church walls. Sarah moved closer to her brother, close enough to see the uncertainty warring with his anger, like how to let love be stronger than fear. A murmur ran through Benjamin's men at her words. She recognized some of them, sons of settlers, young men she'd known from the community. They looked different now, somehow smaller in their heavy winter coats and nervous grips on their rifles. Show them, Standing Bear said softly in Lakota. Show them what you have learned. Sarah reached into her dress and withdrew a small bundle wrapped in soft hide. Inside was the wooden horse Standing Bear had given her months ago, now accompanied by one she had carved herself. She held them out to Benjamin. This first one taught me patience, respect, the value of seeing deeply, she explained. The second, one I made myself, learning their ways not to become them, but to understand them, to build something new. She placed the carvings in her brother's unwilling hands. Feel the difference between them. The first is what I was taught. The second is what I learned to create myself. Benjamin stared at the carvings, his fingers tracing their shapes despite himself. A lifetime of shared memories passed between them in that touch. Summer days playing with wooden toys, their mother's songs, their father's prayers. Before the fear came, before the walls went up. "Sarah," he whispered, and for a moment she heard her little brother again, the one who used to beg her for stories. "Father is dying." The words hit her like a physical blow. Standing Bear's hand found her shoulder, steadying her. She covered it with her own, drawing strength from his presence. "The consumption?" she asked quietly. Benjamin nodded. "Started last month. He sent us to find you. Said he was wrong. Said he needs to see you before..." The wind carried. The sound of young Hawk shifting in his saddle, the creak of leather speaking volumes about choices and consequences. Sarah felt the weight of both worlds pressing in, her father's deathbed and her new life, the past she'd fled and the future she'd chosen. Standing Bear's voice came soft but clear. "The bridge you build must go both ways." Sarah straightened, touching the two-spirit necklace. In its beads, she felt the wisdom of both paths, the Christian charity she'd been taught, and the Lakota understanding she'd learned. Perhaps this was why the spirits had brought her here, not just to find her own way, but to help others find theirs. "Then we build it together," she said, looking between her brother and her chosen family. "All of us." The peace pipe lay before them in the snow, its polished surface reflecting the midday sun. Standing Bear had produced it with ceremonial gravity, the same pipe his grandfather had used to welcome Sarah months ago. Now it represented something larger, a chance to transform enemies into allies, fear into understanding. "Our ways teach that sharing smoke means sharing truth," Standing Bear explained to the wary settlers. "No man can speak false while pipe is lit. No hand can hold weapon while pipe is passed." Benjamin stared at the pipe, then at his sister. Sarah had seen that look before, the internal struggle between ingrained prejudice and newfound doubt. Around them, both groups maintained their positions, but the atmosphere had shifted. Curiosity began to replace suspicion. "Your Protestant God speaks of peace," Sarah said softly to her brother. "Their pipe ceremony honors the same spirit of truth, different paths, same destination." She touched the wooden horses still in his hands. "Like these carvings, different hands, same heart." A young settler, Sarah recognized him as Thomas Wilson's son, stepped forward hesitantly. "My grandmother," he said, voice scratchy with nervousness. "She traded with Indians before the Troubles. Said they knew medicines white doctors hadn't dreamed of." Standing Bear nodded gravely. "Many medicines. My mother, great healer, knows ways to fight consumption's cough." His eyes met Benjamin's. "Could help your father, perhaps." The words hung in the air like frost. Benjamin's fingers tightened. On the wooden horses, his knuckles white with tension. "Our father would never—" "Our father is dying," Sarah interrupted gently, "and his last wish was to make things right. What better way than this?" She gestured to the peace pipe. "Let us build something new from the broken pieces of the old." Young Hawk, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, spoke in careful English. "My wife's brother died of same sickness, white man's disease, but old ways sometimes help ease passing, give comfort when nothing else can." Something shifted in Benjamin's stance. Sarah saw the moment pride gave way to desperate hope. "You would do this? Help the man who cast you out?" "We help because it is right," Standing Bear said simply. "As I helped Sarah in Storm. No one owns wisdom. No one owns healing. These things belong to all people, like air we breathe." Slowly, with the deliberate movements of a man crossing an invisible line, Benjamin knelt beside the peace pipe. "Show me," he said hoarsely. "Show me your way." Standing Bear began the ceremony with practiced grace, explaining each motion, each prayer. Sarah translated when needed, but increasingly found the men communicating directly, finding common ground in gesture and shared intent. The other settlers drew closer, weapons lowering, faces softening with curiosity. "See how he prepares the sacred tobacco," Sarah explained to the gathering circle. "Each pinch offered first to earth and sky, to 4 directions, like our way of crossing ourselves, marking the sacred in physical form." One of Benjamin's men, a gruff older settler named Johnson, snorted softly. "Heathens marking directions while we build proper churches." "And what are your church steeples pointing to?" Sarah challenged gently. "What are your cross-topped spires but markers reaching for heaven? Different words, same yearning, the peace." Pipe passed from hand to hand, each man taking his turn with growing respect for the ceremony. Sarah watched hope bloom like winter flowers as barriers crumbled, as human faces emerged from behind masks of prejudice and fear. Standing Bear spoke of the coming soldiers, of threatened lands and broken promises. Benjamin spoke of settlers' fears, of mysterious raids and missing cattle. Together, they began to see a larger picture. Outside forces pushing both peoples toward conflict neither truly wanted. "Perhaps," Benjamin said slowly, passing the pipe back to Standing Bear, "perhaps there is room for both ways here. Room for understanding." Sarah felt tears freeze on her cheeks, but they were tears of joy. She saw in the faces around her the same transformation she had experienced, the slow awakening to a larger truth, a broader vision of what was possible. Young. Hawk raised his hand for attention. "Snow comes," he said, pointing to gathering clouds. "Big storm, better to face together than apart." Benjamin looked at his men, then at the Lakota warriors. "We have supplies," he offered. "Food, extra blankets. If you have shelter to share, our lodges welcome all who come in peace." Standing Bear replied. He stood, offering his hand to Benjamin in the white man's way of sealing agreements. Benjamin clasped it firmly, then turned to his sister. "Sarah, will you come to see father?" She felt Standing Bear's quiet strength behind her, supporting whatever choice she made. "Yes," she said, "but not as a prodigal returning. I come, as I am now, bridge between worlds, carrier of both medicines." She touched the two-spirit necklace. "Let him see what his daughter has become. Perhaps in seeing, he too will find peace." The first snowflakes began to fall as the two groups merged into one, enemies becoming allies under the growing storm. The peace pipe had done its work, opening hearts that guns could never reach, building bridges that would last longer than any fort's walls. The mixed marriage blanket wrapped around Sarah's shoulders as she rode beside Standing Bear toward her. Childhood home, its intricate pattern telling the story of their union. Lakota geometric designs flowing seamlessly into European floral motifs, neither overwhelming the other. Singing Brook had worked through 3 nights to complete it, calling it a shield of 2 worlds that would protect Sarah during the difficult reunion ahead. The storm had forced both groups to shelter together for 2 days, an unexpected blessing that had allowed walls to crumble and understanding to grow. Now a small party traveled together, Sarah and Standing Bear, Benjamin and young Hawk, and 2 others from each side who had proved most open to new ways of thinking. "Strange how storm brings peace," young Hawk observed, riding close enough for private conversation, like winter forcing enemies into same cave, making them see each other as people. Sarah nodded, remembering how the settler women had marveled at Lakota winter medicines, how their men had learned the superior methods of keeping horses healthy in deep snow. Small exchanges had led to larger ones, stories shared around fires, children playing together despite not sharing a language. "Father may not understand at first," Benjamin warned, pulling his horse alongside hers. "The consumption, it makes him feverish sometimes. He speaks of strange things, of regrets and visions." "Perhaps he sees more clearly now," Standing Bear suggested. "Sickness sometimes strips away walls we build around hearts, shows us truth we hide from ourselves." They crested a familiar rise, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. There was her childhood home, the sturdy log cabin her father had built, smoke rising from its chimney into the pearl-grey sky. The sight brought a flood of memories. Summer evenings on the porch, her mother's garden now buried under snow, the bell that called them in for supper. He insisted on moving back here from town, Benjamin explained. Said he needed to be in the place where it happened, where he made his choice. Sarah felt Standing Bear's hand cover hers, where they rested on the reins. "You are not same woman who left here," he reminded her softly. "You are stronger now. Carry wisdom of both paths." They descended toward the cabin, their horses' hooves breaking through the fresh snow's crust. Sarah saw movement at the window, her mother's face appearing briefly before vanishing again. Then the door opened, and the woman herself stepped out onto the porch, one hand pressed to her mouth in disbelief. "Sarah! Oh, my Sarah!" The cry broke something in Sarah's chest. She was off her horse and running through the snow before she realized she'd moved. Her mother's arms wrapped around her, thin but strong, smelling of wood smoke and the lavender she still grew in pots by the window. My girl," her mother wept, touching Sarah's face, her hair, the beaded dress she wore. "Look at you. You're alive, you're strong." She looked past Sarah to where Standing Bear and the others waited respectfully. "And you've brought family, Mother," Sarah said firmly. "I've brought my new family to meet my first one, to help heal what was broken." Understanding dawned in her mother's eyes as she took in Standing Bear's proud bearing, the way Sarah turned naturally toward him. "The consumption," she said quietly. "It's worse. The doctor says—" She straightened her shoulders. "But you're here now, and you've brought medicine." Standing Bear dismounted, approaching with deliberate calm. He touched the medicine pouch. At his belt, "My mother sends healing, cannot promise cure, but can ease pain. Help him find peace." Sarah's mother studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Peace," she repeated. "Yes, that's what we all need, isn't it? Peace and understanding." They entered the cabin together, Sarah holding the mixed marriage blanket close around her shoulders. The interior was exactly as she remembered. Her mother's, quilts on the walls, her father's Bible on its stand, the scent of pine boughs and cooking herbs. And there, in the bed by the fire, lay the man who had once commanded her fate. Her father's face was gaunt, his once powerful frame diminished by illness. But his eyes were clear as they fixed on her, widening with recognition and something deeper, wonder perhaps, or revelation. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice rough with more than sickness. "I dreamed you came with eagles wearing stars in your hair." She touched the eagle feather Standing Bear had given her, then moved to kneel beside the bed. "I came with new medicine, Father, new wisdom, and old love." He reached for her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Forgive me," he said, the words seeming to cost him greatly. "I was so afraid of what I didn't understand, so sure of my own rightness." "There is nothing to forgive," Sarah said gently, drawing the mixed marriage blanket around both of them. "Only new paths to walk, new bridges to build." Standing Bear stepped forward then, his medicine pouch in his hands, his presence filling the small cabin with quiet dignity. Sarah's father looked up at him, really looked, perhaps seeing, for the first time, not a savage, but a man, not a threat, but a healer. "Will you—" Her father struggled to sit up. "Will you teach me your ways of medicine, while I still can learn?" "We teach each other," Standing Bear replied, beginning to unpack his medicines. "Your daughter shows us this is better. All paths lead to same great spirit, yes? All healing comes from same source." Sarah felt the mixed marriage blanket warm around her shoulders as she watched her two worlds begin to merge, like rivers joining to form something new and powerful and unstoppable as spring. Spring flowers dotted the prairie where snow had lain, their purple and gold petals dancing in the warm breeze. Sarah gathered them carefully, showing her small daughter which blooms were sacred medicine and which were food, just as Singing Brook had taught her 2 years ago. The child's dark eyes, so like her father's, watched intently as small fingers mimicked her mother's movements. "Eagle feather," little Dawn exclaimed suddenly, pointing skyward where a single plume drifted down from above. Standing Bear appeared as if summoned, catching the feather before it could touch earth. He crouched beside them, tucking the gift into their daughter's black hair that held hints of Sarah's brown in the sunlight. "Grandfather's blessing," he said softly in English, then repeated it in Lakota. Like her parents, little Dawn was growing up with both tongues, both traditions flowing together as naturally as streams joining to form a river. The trading post that had grown up around Sarah's father's cabin was visible in the distance, its existence a testament to how much had changed. After Standing Brook's medicines had eased his passing, Sarah's father had left his land with an unusual will, half to Benjamin, half to Sarah and Standing Bear, with instructions that it should become a place where both peoples could meet in peace. Now the post saw regular trade between settlers and Lakota, with Sarah and Standing Bear's home serving as a bridge between cultures. Singing Brook had moved nearby, teaching willing settlers about healing plants while learning their ways of working wool and growing gardens. Young Hawk's children played with settler children, all of them, switching easily between languages. "Time for council," Standing Bear reminded her, helping Sarah to her feet. She brushed prairie dust from her dress, a new design that had become popular among both peoples, combining the practical cut of settler garments with traditional Lakota beadwork and symbolism. The council lodge stood at the heart of the trading post, its unique construction reflecting its purpose. Built in the round like a Lakota lodge, but with settler-style walls, it housed regular meetings where both peoples came together to discuss common concerns, share knowledge, and maintain the peace they had built. Sarah touched the two-spirit necklace she still wore, now accompanied by both a cross and a medicine pouch. "Mother would be proud," she said, watching little Dawn chase butterflies through the spring flowers, "to see how fear can transform into understanding when people choose to learn instead of judge." Standing Bear gathered their daughter in his arms, the eagle feather in her hair matching his own. "You were first to walk between worlds," he said. "Now many follow path you helped create." He gestured to where a group of young settler women were learning beadwork from Lakota elders, while nearby, tribal youth practiced reading from books brought by the last trader. "The path walks both ways," Sarah replied, remembering that first frozen night when a proud warrior had offered mercy to a stranger. "We all learn, we all teach." Little Dawn wriggled free to chase more flowers, her laughter carrying on the spring wind like a promise. Above them, an eagle circled once before heading east, where the rising sun painted the prairie in colors of hope. Sarah took Standing Bear's hand, feeling the strength they had built together. The winter of fear had passed. Here, in this place, between worlds, a new season was blooming, one where understanding grew as naturally as prairie flowers, and love knew no boundaries but those of the endless sky above.